Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MGG, and welcome to part 1 of our Warhammer 40,000 cube review. So the plan for today is we're going to be going over the cards that we think are going to be making a splash in the world of cube. But I am not alone today in this video. I brought in a bit of a ringer, the current champion and literal belt holder from my own cube. Welcome everyone to James. Good to have you here.
Hi, yes, good to be here. So me, I play a frankly unhealthy amount of Vintage Cube when that's up on Magic Online, so I can talk a lot about Cube. If people on the internet are willing to listen to it, then that is great with me. Obviously play a lot of Dan's Cube too, and haven't built my own paper cube. Done well at making friends with people who have. That's my way of engaging with Cube. But yes, great to be here.
Awesome. Yes, yeah. This is the first time I've been talking at someone since I've started this channel. So nice to have you here. So as I mentioned today, we're going to be going over the Warhammer 40,000 set. Before we jump in, quickly worth going over what this set is and kind of how it's actually built, so you kind of know what to expect. So I think the main thing to kind of go over is that this is a commander product primarily. So a lot of the cards are going to be talking about multiplayer stuff. In some aspects, this is going to make the cards stronger. Think like conspiracy cards were made for multiplayer sets. In some aspects, that's going to make some of the cards stronger. In some aspects, it's going to make the cards weaker. So we'll kind of talk about them. One thing James mentioned is the color imbalance. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, just in that these aren't commander decks like they normally release, where there's one for each color pair or whatever. The colors are themed around, I guess, the tribes, the factions in Warhammer 40,000. So, for example, there's lots of black cards because there's a mono black Necrons deck, as well as a Esper Space Marines deck. Astartes, I believe, is the word.
Yep.
And so it's not just that we like black cards more than all the other colors. That is just how the release is.
So that also leads us on nicely to the fact that this is going to be split into 2 videos. In this video, we're going to be looking at white, blue, and black cards, and in the next video, we're going to be looking at everything else. Just because of that mono black Necron deck, there is just a wave of black cards for us to get through. So I guess one thing before we kick off, James, what's your experience with Warhammer? Is this your first foray into the grim, dark universe of the 41st century?
No, not quite. I used to play a fair bit of Warhammer 40,000, but back when I was at school, which was a very long time ago. I had some orcs; they were great. But I have not been engaged with the Warhammer 40,000 content for a very long time. So I'm sure there'll be new things that words I will fail to pronounce, but that's on me.
No, orcs, a man after my own heart. For me, Warhammer and Magic have always been very intertwined. Like the way I got into both was my grandparents went to a car boot and brought me back a carrier bag with Warhammer and Magic cards when I was like 9.
That sounds like a great day.
Yeah. So as I was like, oh, these things. These are now my hobbies for the next infinitum amount of time.
You just locked in at that point.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So so I'm personally super pumped about this set. There's a few cards which I admit I've added to the list because I think they're cool. I will defend them when they come up.
Also, a valid reason to add them to your cube. That, I think, is the prerogative you get by being the person who bothered to build a cube. You get to just have cards that you like, and no one can tell you otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you, James. I'll need you defending me when I bring that up to everyone else.
It doesn't mean they won't go last pick every time they draft them, but you can have them in there.
No, very true. All right, awesome. So I think this now's a good time to jump in with our first white card. So James, you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. So first white card is Celestine, the Living Saint. It's a 3/4 flying lifelink for 4 and a white, and it has the ability Healing Tears. They're using the flavor text for abilities in this set as they did in the D&D set. And that ability is at the beginning of your end step, return target creature with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the total amount of life you gained this turn. So this is, I think, not a white card that probably goes in the majority of cubes, but I think there are some spots for it. Specifically, I'm thinking Aristocrats, because this card does enable itself. Your 3/4 flying lifelink is normally going to be able to get through in the air, so that gives you X as free already. And then if you're playing Aristocrats, you'll have some Blood Artist effects in there most likely. There are quite a few of those cards, including one from the recent Dominaria set. And you're going to be fueling up your graveyard naturally as you sacrifice creatures. So I think this is maybe a nice little engine card for that deck. Not super efficient at 5 mana, but it does get you something straight away if you have other ways to gain life. So that's nice that you don't have to untap for it necessarily before you get your value. Yeah, I think it has some potential.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the it not going in all cubes. Like 5 in white is quite tricky. So one thing I do like about this is that this is actually a human as well. It's not an angel. So if you are doing any of like the human tribally stuff, or if you're like, or if you're running Winota, I think it could be quite fun.
Oh, that's an interesting shout. Yeah.
The other thing as well I could see with this is if your cube has Soul Sisters.
Yeah, definitely. You can get really big on that X, and specifically cards like Martyr of Sands, where you sack it to gain a tremendous amount of life. Then X gets really big. You can either get your Martyr of Sands back, or X might be 10 at that point. You could get something massive back. How you get that into your graveyard in Soul Sisters, up to you.
Are you trying to reanimate Grizzlebrand with this, James?
the old Soul Sisters Grizzlebrand Reanimator deck. Maybe it's an angle. We'll see.
Cool. Right, let's crack on to our next card then. So next up we have Defenders of Humanity. It is X 2 and a white for an enchantment. When Defenders of Humanity enters the battlefield, create X 2/2 white Astartes warrior creature tokens with Vigilance. And it has the activated ability X 2 and a white, exile Defenders of Humanity, create X 2/2 white Astarte warrior creature tokens with Vigilance. Activate only if you control no creatures and only during your turn. So I added this because I think this is it's an interesting version of Finale of Glory. I think it is the white one that's X white create X 2/2. I think warriors with Vigilance. So with this, you pay one more to get it out in the first place, but then you do have that kind of redundancy later on if there's been a wrath or if things have just gone badly, or if you're in kind of like the Aristocrat deck and you've kind of gone a bit ham with sacking. That's the kind of spot I think it's competing in, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I could see that. It is very, very mana intensive. Like, what value of X are we happy with here? Because X's 1 or 2 is really bad. X's 3, you're playing Imperial Oath, which was a common from Kamigawa that you didn't get to scry. But yeah, I could sit. So you do need a lot of mana. But it is very splashable. It's only 1 white pip, and I could see the thing of the initial time you cast it, you use your tokens to stabilize the board, trade off, trump, whatever, and then later in the game, when you have a lot of mana, you can crack it for a lot of creatures if you have the board clear.
Nice, yeah, could be fun. So again, part of this is me liking Space Marines. Despite what I said about orcs, I do like Space Marines, so I'm a fan of the tokens. Cool. All right, do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, sure. So the next one is Grey Knight Paragon. This is 4 and a white for a 4/4 flash at uncommon. When Grey Knight Paragon enters the battlefield, you destroy an attacking creature. If that creature is a demon, exile it instead, assuming that is a flavor thing. So this is, I suspect, not quite efficient enough for a lot of cubes, but in Peasant Cube, this is pretty interesting. This will keep you alive when a lot of spots when just a removal spell wouldn't. 4/4's a big enough body that you'll often get to destroy one attacking creature and then block another and eat it. Except that there is a slight tension in that often with flash creatures where you want to play them in, say, a control deck, is like you'll leave up your counter spells or your interaction, then if you don't need it, you can play your flash threat at the end of turn. This doesn't quite do that in the ways destroy a tapped creature would, because you do have to play it in combat. So if they then play a spell that you wanted to counter in their second main, you're tapped out. But I think, yeah, in Peasant Cube, this keeps you alive really well.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. So this one and the next card we're going to get to, I think, might actually be some of the strongest uncommon cards for a Peasant Cube. There's certain numbers in Peasant Cubes that isn't as much. Most of the good ones are rares or mythics, so that there is definitely a quality drop off. So I think in a Peasant Cube, that this could be quite strong. The biggest thing is going to be competing actually against, I think, might be the next one. So the next card up is Thunderwolf Cavalry. It is 4 and a white for a 4/4 creature Astartes warrior with first strike. It has Crushing Teeth, which is whenever Thunderwolf Cavalry deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature that you control. So if you have base power and stats, I think at Peasant this is going to be one of the biggest things. The first strike is nice. It's going to be trading off with most things in that cube, apart from like some big green ramp threats. It's going to be trading off with a lot of them, or the first strike will keep it around. And then if you have any kind of board state already, I think if this hit once, I think it probably wins you the game. If you have like 2 or 3 tokens with this, or if you have any kind of like +1 on counters synergy, which is also a thing in that cube. Like there's plenty of like some of the Outlast creatures from Khans, which give your creatures trample or flying if they have +1 counters on it. I think this gets in first, and then the next turn you're probably winning. Is kind of where I see it.
Yeah, no, I really like it. Seems like a powerful threat. It's also nice that it's potentially a card that goes in multiple different archetypes and works synergistically in them. If you're common themes in white, you might have, say you had a red-white go-wide deck and a green-white counters deck. Well, this is a nice pivot card between them, which is a pretty good spot to be in. So the next one we have is Ultramarines Honor Guard. This is 3 and a white for a 2/2 at rare. It has other creatures get +1/+1, so it's a Lord. And crucially, it has Squad. So I think this is the first Squad card we've come to. So Squad in this card is cost 2 mana. I believe they all cost 2 mana, in fact.
Yeah, I think they're all 2 generic mana.
So, and Squad says, an additional cost to cast this spell, you may pay 2 generic mana any number of times. When this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it. So in this case, we're looking at a 2/2 Lord for 4 mana, kind of underrate, but if you pay 6 mana, you then get 2 Lords which will both pump each other, so you have 2 3/3s to start off with, and all of your other creatures will get +2/+2. Obviously, fantastic spot to be in. It's a lot of mana, but it does keep scaling up from there. So this is a pretty powerful top end card. And crucially, only 1 white mana. The squad's costs don't have any coloured mana in them. So this is also very, very splashable. You could imagine a green deck that's maybe running like a Deranged Hermit or something similar. And this could then, you can use all your mana from your mana elves, get this out, 2 or 3 copies of it, and all your tokens are huge. Your Llanowar elves are suddenly big threats. And that's a pretty nice spot to be in.
Nice, yeah, I like that. So do you see this primarily as like a 6-drop then, do you think?
I mean, as a 4-drop, there are just a lot of better ones. You compare this to like Gideon Ally of Zendikar. This is not very close.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
But yeah, you know, sometimes you will play it for 4 mana and it will be good, but I think you're not putting it in your deck unless you think you're going to be able to get to the squad cost a reasonable amount of time.
Right. Next up, how do you pronounce this?
You're the Warhammer expert. You need to tell me.
Yeah, I know, but I read the lore. I don't know how it's pronounced. That's my problem with magic cards as well. All right, let's go with Zephrim. It is 3 and a white for a 3/3 creature human warrior. It also has Squad for 2 generic, and it has Flying, Vigilance, and weirdly, Miracle for 1 and a white. So I kind of want to talk about this because there's a couple cards in this set, but I think this is the first time, or this is the first set we've seen Miracle on a creature. One of the reasons I kind of wanted to talk about this is because as a mechanic, I like the idea of Miracle. I like the idea of like setting up the top of your library, doing something cool with it. I think one of the biggest issues with a lot of the cards that you could play in Cube are kind of a bit miserable. There's like there's a board wipe, there's an extra turn spell, that kind of thing. this feels like a fairer version of it, because if you're miracling this, 2 mana for a 3/3 flyer is nice, but 4 mana for a because importantly you can pay the squad cost when you miracle it. So 4 mana for 2/3/3 flyers with vigilance seems quite strong.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. It's a nice balance between it's a powerful above rate threat when you miracle it, but the game does not just end. Um, yeah, you do want ways to set this up, though, I think. You do not want your miracles to be actual miracles. You want to be able to foresee your miracles. Because at 4 mana for a 3/3 flyer or 6 mana for 2, it's kind of underwhelming. But yeah, when you're miracling this, like if you miracle this with 6 mana in play, you just get 3/3/3 flyers. That's going to be really tough to beat. Flying Vigilance as well. Um, yeah, so think Brainstorms, think Jace the Mind Sculptor. There's a Esper Planeswalker, I believe, that stacks the top of your library as well.
Aminatu, is it
That's the
Aminatu?
card. Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, you want to be able to set it up, but if you can, I think this is really powerful.
So the other card I want to talk about is this with like Scroll Rack, because there was a brief period of time when I had my cube separated into one powered, one underpowered. In the powered one, I was running Scroll Rack with land tax, because you can do the thing of draw, especially you're drawing cards off of land tax, then you scroll rack them back and draw 4 new cards. You basically end up with 4 cards in your hand.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah.
So there is a rough shell that kind of already exists with things like scroll rack, like Chase the Mind Sculpture, as you kind of said.
Sensei's Divining Top as well is in a lot of cubes.
Yeah, and even what's the big blue God Eternal Kefnet cares about the top of library as well. That's it. That's interesting with some extra turn spells. So this could be a way of taking that maybe, which I think could be quite interesting.
No, I like that for sure. Nice to have some more good payoffs in that space to maybe justify it as a little package in your cube. So the next card we have up is Heralds of Tzeentch. This is 4 and a blue for a flying cascade 3/3. So again at uncommon. So probably one for Peasant Cube here. But this is a really nice little value threat in Peasant Cube, I think. Worth saying, I think there is a little bit of deck building tension here with Cascade creatures in blue in particular, because often your blue decks want counter spells, and Cascade and counter spells really, really not a combo. Having said that, this is only 1 blue pip. You can splash it. Maybe you're a more aggressive blue deck. You don't have those counters. But it is worth bearing in mind with Cascade in general. You don't want too many counter spells, and really just too many situational cards. Don't want combat tricks. You don't want things like destroy an attacking creature like we saw earlier. You really want cards to cascade into that are going to do something at any point in the game whenever you hit them. But if your deck is set up like that, I like this as a threat. 3/3 flying is a good body.
So this was one that I added to the list. So thank you for. And you brought up a lot of points that I didn't think about when like the stuff with the counter spells is spot on. Thanks for that. I think one of the reasons why I put it on the list is that blue 5s is another one of those spots in a peasant cube where you do seem a bit lacking. From just having a quick look, the best things I think that you can currently do is either pay full price for a Mole Drifter or full price for a Riftwing Cloudscape.
Oh, I'm not above doing any of those things, but
no. But like as a cube builder, I like to cheat, and like Mole Drifter costs 3 in my cube.
That's true.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
it's to kind of pad out the actual 5 section.
Yeah, you look at non-peasant cubes, you will see a lot of common and uncommon cards lower in the cube, right? In the curve, right? Because they print efficient removal spells, for example, at common and uncommon. They don't really print big, super powerful, flashy creatures at common and uncommon because limited would be miserable. We all played for Inspiring Overseer in draft. We don't want to play against it again.
All right, let's move on to next up we have Sicarian Infiltrator. It is 2 and a blue for a 1/2 human soldier. It has flash, it has squad 2, and it has Benedictum of the Omnissiah. When this enters the battlefield, draw a card. So again, so this is importantly also a uncommon. The fact that it scales, this is kind of a build your own Mole Drifter a little bit. I often get caught out by this. I kind of half assume this had flying. Like, although unlike a lot of Magic cards that have wings and don't fly, this doesn't have wings. This is a person just standing on the ground. So that's kind of on me a little bit. But I think in a Peasant Cube or in a slower style of cube, paying 5 for this, getting 2 of them, drawing 2 cards, I think is fine. Like the fact it has flash makes it, I think, playable for me, because you can be holding this up with other things, and then if your opponent doesn't go in, like play something into your counterspell, or they don't play something that you want to counterspell, just then and there, you can play this, get a bit of value, get some bodies, and draw some cards. I think it could be interesting, and I think it could be solid. But
yeah, for sure, I like it. Also, just if they make attacks with X1s, getting 2 1/2s at instant speed in the middle of combat, getting to trade up, and then getting 2 cards out of the deal sounds really strong. Also, if there's a flicker theme in your cube, this is a nice value thing to flicker.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Any creature that draws a card we like in a flicker style.
Don't flicker the token. That will go poorly for you, but you can flicker the original one. Okay, so next up we have Sister of Silence, which is 4 and a blue for a 3/3 flash. And it has the ability Psychic Abomination. When Sister of Silence enters the battlefield, counter target instant spell, sorcery spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Will fully admit that when I previously read this, I thought it just countered all the spells. There was a lot of words. But I think this is still pretty solid. I think you do really... The conditional nature of the counterspell, though, and the fact that you're not really happy just playing the body out without any value, means you really want your deck to be able to play at instant speed to make full use of this card. If you're just passing with this up, and if they don't play into it, you're either doing nothing or playing a 5-mana vanilla 3/3 at their end of turn. That's pretty weak. But if you're passing with this up, and maybe another counterspell in case they play a creature, or a card draw effect, a fact or fiction, whatever, so you're not forced into playing this or wasting your mana, I think this can be really strong.
Yeah, I think so. For me, one of the conversations with this card is this is kind of competing against, in terms of creatures, it's competing against Venser Shaper Savant, the flash Venser that returns a spell or a permanent to its owner's hand, and it's kind of competing against Nimble Obstructionist, the one that cycles and counters activated or triggered ability. Because for me, actually, that's the most interesting part of this. Like, I think Stifles are getting stronger. I think there's just more abilities that you want to be countering, countering, and also mana bases are getting greedier. Like fetches are going higher in terms of like they've always been very high in pick orders, but with the full cycle of triomes, it just means that people can get the mana bases they want quite easily. It is 5 mana, so at that point, should you really be using this on a fetch land? That's kind of the argument. But yeah, it's an interesting card. I think this alluded to. This seems a bit overcosted. Like, how would you feel about this if it did just counter a spell?
I think it goes up a lot there, because then you can reliably pass with 5 mana up and feel pretty confident that you're going to be able to get to use this productively. Whereas if you pass with this up and they just play a creature, you're pretty sad about it. That's set, and you have nothing else to do. That's setting you back a long way in the game. So that would be my concern, really.
All right, another card I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce, but we'll give it a go anyway. Anrakir the Traveler? Let's go with that. Anrakir the Traveler. It is 4 and a black for a 4/4 legendary artifact creature Necron. It has Lord of the Fyrian Legions. Whenever it attacks, you may cast an artifact spell from your hand or graveyard by paying life equal to its mana rather than paying its mana cost. So I'm probably going to go over the slightly more fair versions of this, and then I'll throw it over to James to kind of tell me how to break it. But anything that lets you cheat on mana is going to be good. Like the fact that you're paying life for this is fine. Like you reanimate stuff back, you pay life for that. This is fine. I'm kind of seeing this in. So a lot of the artifacts in this set are in black, like because the Necron deck is all in black. So in a lot of cubes, I would say the artifact colors is more blue, red, and there is some splash into Grixis for things like for some of the big Tesserets, that kind of thing. This could be a card that makes me in my own cube splash artifacts into black, because the ability to play this, then just follow up with a worm coil that gains you the life back, so then you can put in the mere battle sphere or something like that, or if you put it into your graveyard, like this kind of goes nicely with kind of like the cheaty interplay stuff. I think it could be strong. It is a vanilla 4/4 for 5. It means it's not going to just die to anything, but it doesn't have like if it had menace, that'd probably be too good actually. But no, I think it's a very strong card. All right, James, what would you do to this card?
Yeah, you can definitely get up to some shenanigans here. I do really like that this sort of plays both ways, right? Because in your mana artifact deck, you tend to have a lot of acceleration. So accelerating this out on like turn 3 maybe would be the earliest you can reasonably get it out without a lot of power. But then the next turn you're attacking, you're playing you could even go up to a Blightsteel Colossus or whatever from your hand. That's really, really strong because that is a turn where you're putting a really big threat into play and you still have all your mana available that turn, whether that be to counter a spell, play another threat, whatever. And then if you draw this late, the recursion can be incredible once they've dealt with some of your artifacts, or if you're proactively putting them into your graveyard. In terms of how to break this card, I think the most fun you could have, and it would be only you having fun, not your opponent. But if you combine this with Mindslaver, you can put a Mindslaver into play, crack it, take their next turn. Then you attack with this again. They probably don't have a blocker because you took Mindslavered their turn. You could have attacked with it to get out of the way or used their own removal spell on it. Then you can just pay 6 life and Mindslaver them again. That's really, really strong. The life will add up. You can't do it forever, but once you've Mindslavered them a couple of times, if you're not winning the game, I think that's on you, really. I don't think you can blame this card. Yeah, no, I like it. I think this could go quite nicely in a really artifact heavy deck. You do need to have those high impact artifact threats though, like putting a Signet back into play, not really a good enough reason to justify putting this in your deck. But no, I do like it.
Yeah, I think that's something we'll probably get on to, like with definitely some of the other cards. But as we're talking about it here, it's probably worth bringing up as well. I like having artifacts be my cheat into play effects, because it means they go in the sneak attack deck, they go in the reanimate deck, and they go in the tinker decks. The kind of the issue I have at kind of the power level mine's at, because mine is it's basically a vintage cube, but there's no super fast mana. But I'm also not running things like Blightsteel, because that's a bit. It's very strong, basically. Like I don't think the cube needs that Grizzlebrand and Archon of dumb turns, but I like the fact that so we'll get onto it with some of the cards we're going to be coming up to, but having big artifacts be your cheat targets for those decks, I really like, because it just means they go in so many things, and it means there isn't just one deck who wants the Grizzlebrand. There's like multiple decks that want the big dumb finisher. So I personally like that, because it gives you a bit more diversity when you're actually building.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So the next one we have up is Arco Flagellant. This is 2 and a black for a 3/1 that can't block. It has squad 2 and it has the ability Endurance. You may pay 3 life. Arco Flagellant gains indestructible until end of turn. I'm kind of low on this one. I think you compare this to something like a Dante Vanguard. The difference between 2 and 3 mana is really, really big here, and the can't block kind of hurts. Obviously, the upside is it scales with your mana, but so for 5 mana, you're getting 2 3/1s that can't block. The issue with theirs, it's a 5-drop that doesn't really do anything if you're behind. It doesn't help stabilize you at all. It's, I guess, pretty good against a control deck, so maybe this is like a sideboard card at a pinch, but Yeah, if you're getting beaten down, this is not where you want to be.
Yeah, no, yeah, I completely agree. If this was the other way around, if this was 2 mana, if this was 1 black and the squad cost was 3, I would like that more because then it's kind of, or
Yeah,
in an ideal world, this would just be 1 black and squad is still 2. But yeah, I completely agree. It feels 1 mana too expensive. Yeah, as you said, Adonto Vanguard is,
I can block, and it's 2 mana. Yeah,
yeah, that's exactly kind of what you want. And yeah, this would be a nice card in mono black aggro, but yeah, it is
yeah.
1 too expensive, as you said. So let's get on to another card that I'm probably going to throw quickly your way. Biotransference. It is 2 black for an enchantment. Creatures you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for creature spells you control, creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And whenever you cast an artifact spell, you lose 1 life and create a 2/2 black Necron Warrior artifact creature token. So, first thing to say in this is designed for Commander, where generally the first couple of turns are spent ramping, and you can play a 4-mana enchantment that doesn't do much, and no, you're still going to have like 35 life at least to kind of get yourself into the game. You're still building by the time you play this. In 1-on-1, taking turn 4 off to effectively do nothing is tricky. Obviously, this gets way better if you have 0 mana artifacts in your cube. Unfortunately, probably not like Moxen and stuff because you're going to play them out to actually play this. But I'm thinking more like baubles or like lotus petals, that kind of thing, or even like cheap like chromatic sphere or something like that, like cheap spells. Because ideally, you want to be, I think, playing this and following up with something very quickly. Otherwise, you're just going to get beaten down by like a questing beast or something like that. But obviously, this spell is very powerful. The fact that there's so many artifact synergies, there's so many things you can do. James, what do you think?
I think this is a really cool card. I love the design space here. It's really open ended. I think this is the sort of card that you'll put it in your cube thinking it goes in one set of decks to enable a certain set of synergies, and people are just going to go off the wall and do completely different like creative stuff you've never thought of with it. And I think that's a really good place to be for a cube card. I think there's a certain amount of deck building tension here in that that first line of text, which makes all your creatures into artifacts, that's potentially really powerful because, you know, some of the most busted cards in Magic do artifact synergy things. Think, your Tolarian Academies, your Tinkers, etc.
Ooh, James.
But the thing is, you don't want to. In those decks, probably most of your creatures are already artifact creatures because you don't want your artifact synergies to not work unless you've drawn and played biotransference. Um, Having said that, there are lots of really cool combos you can do with this. I really want to see someone tinker for an Emrakul or like Goblin Welder in a Craterhoof Behemoth. That sounds incredible to me.
Yeah.
There's also potentially some room for it in a deck that doesn't care about artifacts at all, because you can just read this as whenever you play a creature, lose 1 life and make a 2/2. Potentially quite interesting in a deck which wants to replay the same creatures multiple times. For example, if you have like a combo-y elves deck, it's often green-black, you can be recurring things with like Wirewood Symbiote and the like, getting your tokens over and over again. That's quite cool. Having said that, all the things you said are very, very valid. You may well just be dead. I think it's a really fun card. You could put it in your cube, try it, see how it plays. But you probably do want to be getting this out early. You can't, if you're accelerating this out, maybe you can afford to take that turn. You can't, I think, just play this on turn 4 that often and hope that that's okay and no one kills you in the meantime. It probably won't play out like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. 100% agree.
So next one we have up is Blight Grenade. This is 4 and a black for sorcery. Destroy target creature. All creatures get -3/-3 until end of turn. So 5 mana sweeper. We have Damnation, we have Toxic Deluge. Why are we playing this? I think we're playing this not if our deck has no creatures. I think the upside of this is your creatures get to live through it. You still get to kill their big creature and wipe up the small stuff, is where this is the upside this has over something like Damnation. Yeah, so think maybe, in a sort of green-black deck, you maybe don't want to be playing Damnation because, you'll have some big mid-rangey threats of your own out, but maybe most of your creatures live through this. You get to kill that one big scary thing and still clear up all the small stuff your opponent has. Not super efficient, but I think could be a role player.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think the thing for me is this. I added this to the list because I think it's cool. I agree with everything you've said. I think the biggest issue is that this feels more like a sideboard card.
Yeah, I could see that.
That's the biggest one of the biggest sins that I think you can commit when building a cube is putting in too many sideboard cards, if any sideboard cards. Like every card you play, I think you should be aiming to main deck, and then if you happen to have something that works better in the matchup, that's fine, but not like pure putting in things specifically for sideboard cards. Probably mean like if you need to put this in, it means that you're like the token deck in your cube is too good. So that means that you either need to look at the token deck or make the other decks a bit stronger. But no, it's a cool card. But I think it's a bit too expensive and a bit underpowered for what we're after.
Sure, I could see that. I suppose the other thing to say about it is it's only a single black pip. Sweepers, your Damnations and the like, your Wraths tend to be double pipped. So maybe you get to splash this in a deck where you wouldn't otherwise have access to a sweeper.
Let's moving on. I think it's me next. With Hex Mark Destroyer. This is 4 black for a artifact creature Necron. It is a 6/6 that has multi-threat Emanator, which means it can't be blocked except by 6 or more creatures. It also has 4 black to unearth it. So, and importantly, this is also a uncommon. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the best black 6-drop for Peasant Cube, because this basically reads as 6 mana, 6/6 unblockable. It's going to be very rare that they have 6 or more creatures, and then if they do, this is almost going to like if your opponent has 6 creatures, you're already losing, or they're all tokens, and you might trade with all of them, and then you can just unearth it back and bring it back. Yeah. So in terms of other options for Peasant Cube, the best thing I can see that you can do for costing 6 is delving 1 on a Gurmag Angler.
This does seem better than that, I agree. Yeah, no, this seems strong actually in that context. Your opponent's going to be real worried about their life total if this is in the graveyard, just waiting to 6 them out of nowhere. I like it.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact it's an artifact, I think, means that it's going to be fair in that cube, because like your things like your Abrades will answer it, and your Rex Sages will answer it. But there's also the element of, I mean, Tinkers are uncommon, isn't it? That's probably one that most people don't play, I would imagine. But
I mean, I guess if this is the biggest thing you're tinkering out, Tinker's maybe a cool but fair card in a Peasant Cube. Cool. Next one we have is... Oh, I'm going to pronounce this badly.
Sorry, James.
We have Illuminator Cesaris, I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
It is 2 and a black for a 3/3 rare. It has tap, sacrifice another creature, add an amount of black equal to the sacrificed creature's mana value. This is a pretty interesting card. It's kind of hard to pick out the deck it obviously goes in. Maybe there's some sort of aristocrats thing here, but then aristocrats creatures decks tend to have quite a low curve, and notably this doesn't do anything with tokens, which is kind of unfortunate. You could potentially make a lot of mana very, very quickly if you're sacrificing, say, a delve creature. You run out of Gurmag Angler and sack it, and you're off to the races, But again, that's kind of conditional. I think it's a really cool card. I think it's just finding the right archetype for it to work in.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I my first thought was aristocrats, but in that shell, there's other like that you have like your Henny, you have other things that you want to be sacking to. Like it's if you're playing this card, I think you're doing something unfair with it.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Most of the lines I have seem like overkill, like Goblin Welder something in to sack it to this, so that you can then play something bigger. with the mana you have in your kind of using this as kind of like a battery. So kind of like you can like top up with something big in your graveyard to play something even bigger. But then at that point, should you just be
Then why didn't
yeah,
you just
exactly.
reanimate the big thing in the
Exactly.
first
Well,
place?
well,
Yeah,
well, because this is a like so this is an artifact, but it just makes mana for any creature. So it's kind
this
of
is true. Yes,
so
yes.
the best example I can see is like someone removes your creature on your main phase, so you can then sack it and use the mana. But
That's on them, really, isn't it? Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. I think the other issue in aristocrats, right, is they tend to really want repeatable sack outlets, and this is only once a turn. Yeah, but I mean, it feels like it has potential. If someone figures out how to break this, put it in the comments.
It's been around in Commander, and I think this kind of complements it there. But like an artifact style aristocrat deck, like what's the like you have like some of the modular stuff.
Sure, it's
Like
just like a mini KCI, I guess.
yeah.
Croc Clan Iron works.
Ooh, James. No. What's the beast that when like, you can sacrifice any artifact to put a +1 counter on it
Oh, Arcbound Ravager.
in a deck that's already running Arcbound Ravager? Like obviously this doesn't go
Okay, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
this is this is doing the same thing as an Arcbound Ravager. It's a sack outlet, but like in a shell where you have like artifact creatures you want to die and they come back, so like junk diver type stuff. Like we're kind of getting onto some of the other like. I think I'm kind of building the commander deck of that this goes in rather than building the cube deck. I think.
Sure, sure. But then it is worth noticing, this is obviously from the mono black Necron deck. This is kind of the theme of that deck, and there are loads of cards in this set that work in that artifact graveyardy space. So maybe there is now a cube archetype that can do these things where there wasn't before. So, and yeah, then I could definitely see this being a big part of it. You don't necessarily have to be playing something huge. If you have like powerful activated abilities, you can be using with all this mana. If you're doing something productive with mana, this can certainly be strong.
No, definitely. I think that's quite a nice segue in terms of the artifact stuff to Imhotep the Stormlord, our next card. It's 2 black for legendary artifact creature Necron. Is a 3/3 and has 2 abilities. The first one is Phyron. Whenever one or more artifact cards leave your graveyard, create 2/2 black Necron warrior artifact creature tokens. It also has Grand Strategist. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target artifact creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains menace until end of turn. So both of these abilities, I think, are solid to strong, basically. The top one, I think, works very well in just like in the Goblin world of things, as we kind of mentioned, or just in any with Delirium becoming more prevalent in some of the recent sets. You are running things like some of the baubles, like Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star, to try and get up your Delirium count. And those cards also put things into the graveyard as well. So you're putting artifacts into the graveyard. Like the fact it's leave the graveyard, like it doesn't have to be reanimated. It doesn't have to be like, oh, sorry, it can be reanimated. It can be, cheated into play.
That's very interesting. You can even delve something away, right? And you get your 2 tokens. That's very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm thinking. It's like
Yeah.
the top ability. What I'm trying to say is basically it's not just in a artifact build. I could see it just in a Golgari mid-rangey or like a Rakdos mid-rangey thing that also has artifacts in it that is putting in there for that delirium. Like this in a deck with like Grimflayer, for example,
Sure.
could be a thing. And then the bottom ability I think is more for the artifact deck. Like this giving +2/+2 to any artifact creature and menace is quite nice. Like not that a Wormcoil Engine needed menace, but it's nice to have.
Can't hurt. Yeah, no, I think this is a really powerful card. I feel like you're there for the top ability, and the bottom one is a nice to have bonus. But the top ability seems like it can really go off. Actually, imagine if you are that heavy artifact deck. Imagine you just have like a relic of Progenitus sitting around. You can target yourself with that thing. You can just, I think, if you have the ability to play this and straight away get those 2/2 Necron warriors, this is like kind of approaching like Grave Titan type territory, and it costs 4 mana. This is, I think, if you get there, it's really, really strong. And I think, yeah, you need to be in that artifact graveyard space. You can't just rely on your opponent will kill your artifacts and therefore they'll be in your graveyard. You probably do need to either loot them away or sacrifice them. Um, But if you're doing that anyway, this is like a real strong reason to be in that archetype, I think. If your cube involves some egg strategy where you're sacrificing your artifacts for value, you maybe have a clan ironworks, you're recurring them. I think this has a lot of potential. I think it doesn't just slot into most cubes straight away without any other changes, but I think there are a few cards in here that may think there could be some interesting black artifact decks.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's very interesting because I know a lot of cube designers do and you have it in like the Mitgo vintage cube. They struggle with what does mono black do apart from be a like a secondary color to all the other ones. Like that could be quite interesting. Like if this if a lot of the cards in this set lead us to a world where black artifacts is a thing now, that could be quite cool.
Cool. Next up, we have Necron Deathmark. This is 3 black for a 5/3 flash. When Necron Deathmark enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target creature, and target player mills 3 cards. So we've seen this sort of creature before, sort of Ravenous Chupacabra type space. So you're paying a mana more than Chupacabra, but on top of that, you're getting flash, you're getting a much better body, and you get that mill free. And it's an artifact. That's a lot of things. So possibly a nice enabler if we're doing black artifact graveyard things. This gets you a mill, this gets you a powerful ETB if you want to sacrifice it and bring it back. And that flash obviously is a really big upside over something like Chupacabra in that you get to interact on your opponent's turn. Same with all these value creatures. Nice if you're doing recurring nightmares type shenanigans. Lots of value to be had.
Yeah, no. So I think I'm fine paying the 1 extra mana for this to have flash. I think that's a perfectly fine trade off because you don't feel like you can keep this up or you can do other things on your turn. I quite like this card. I think there's a few cards in this set specifically that although Ravenous Chupacabra is only like 4 or 5 years old, it's starting to show its age a little bit.
Yes, I would agree, and Bone Shredder even more so, I'd say.
Necrotal and Bone Shredder should not in 2022 shouldn't I think we're beyond that, but I think because I'm just looking at my 4s, so this is what it's currently competing against. So Grief, Rankle, Ravenous Chupacabra, and Yorgmoth Thran position. So, one of those is very different to the other 3, basically.
Yes.
This seems like the next step up for this. Like if they're printing this for 5 mana, I would not be surprised if soon we have either Ravenous Chupacabra as it is as a 2/2 with flash or with like menace. The fact that this has like a keyword, although it's flash, it's not menace, it's not evasion, is still very interesting. And
and 5/3 is just pretty big, you know. I feel like to really maximize this card, you want to be using that mill free, but black decks generally are like. I think this looks pretty strong to me.
Next one is me. We have Out of the Tombs. It is 2 and black for an enchantment. It has, at the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Eon counters on Out of the Tombs, then mill cards equals the number of Eon counters on it. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, instead return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you can't, you lose the game. So I'm going to be honest with this. This card is not good in Cube. I will say I will say this first, and then I will defend it a bit because I think this is interesting. So similar to what I was saying about Miracle, actually, I like the idea of the win with no cards in the library style decks, but I personally find Thassa's Oracle a bit too oppressive, a bit too. It is glass cannony, but if you combine that with demonic consultation or anything else that kind of just mills your library, it's a 2-card combo. You just win then and there. What I like about this is that you're probably going to win, but you get to do you're playing with your food a little bit rather than having the immediate win. You're returning something big and then you're beating them down with that. As I said, this is not in those strategies. This is not better than Thassa's Oracle. It's actually this is the worst of that of the 3 that of Thassa's Oracle, Lab Maniac, and Jace Wielder of Mysteries, I think it is. This is the worst of that. The one interesting part with this is that this is a black card, whereas the other ones are blue. So most of the things that mill your deck, your Demonic Consultations, your Doomsdays, they are in black. The enablers for this is in black.
So the issue with this with Demonic Consultation is that Demonic Consultation exiles your library, it doesn't mill it. So this can be a combo, but you have to already have the payoffs in your graveyard. But once they're there, it fast forwards you to getting to return them, which is pretty strong. You don't have to wait around for a million turns, putting Eon counters on it and waiting for your opponent to kill you. And that's pretty good. The other way I think you can use this, though, is if you're just a deck that wants to put loads of cards in your graveyard, this does do that kind of quickly. Like, after 2 turns, you've milled 6 cards. It's kind of slow, but it is 3 mana, but it does have that inevitability as well. Assuming you're going to have enough creatures that will win you the game eventually, if this sticks in play. Worth noting, if you mill yourself a bunch and then they kill this, you're in trouble, because then you will just draw a card and lose the game. But yeah, I think it's an interesting card. I'm not sure how good it is.
No, I know. If I'm honest, this is to me what like biotransference is to you.
Yeah. I think you can also, I guess, do if you're doing the Thassa's Oracle Brain Freeze thing, this is kind of like if you have Thassa's Oracle in your deck, this is like you have a second copy, right? Because if you have the Thassa's Oracle in your deck, you Brain Freeze yourself, you mill the Oracle, you play this. That works. Cool. So next up we have Pox Walkers. This is 2 and a black for a 3/1 zombie with Death Touch. And it has Curse of the Walking Pox. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, return Pox Walkers from your graveyard to battlefield tapped. This card I think is really cool. This goes in a lot of different places. It's great in a Madness deck, I think. You're going to have discard outlets anyway to just put it in your graveyard, and then whenever you cast a Madness spell, you don't cast that from your hand. You discard that and then cast it. So that will bring this back for no mana. Whenever you get resources without any sort of mana investment, you can normally do something pretty good with that. Also triggers with like flashback or any other card you can cast from the graveyard. Pretty strong, flexible card, I think. I think it can go in a few different homes.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's a zombie as well helps it out, because like this with like Gravecrawler in a zombie style shell, because you can.
Oh, that's fantastic! Yeah.
If you have a zombie, if you have any zombie in play, you can bring back Gravecrawler. That then brings this back, so that kind of could just that could steamroll quite quite quickly, basically. But yeah, I quite like this card. I think it could be quite fun.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that it's no mana investment means you can keep sacrificing it and then re-triggering the ability. Yeah.
And generally speaking, I'm playing most recursive black threats just because they do just go into so many decks. Like of all of them, this has the ability you are reliably going to do the least, because the rest of them are like, if a creature attacked, pay some mana, bring it back. If a creature died, bring it back. If you control a certain type of creature, this is the cast from anywhere other than your hand is going to, I think, going to be the nichest, unless you are in that dedicated like Madness deck or in a deck like that. But generally speaking, I am at a point where I think I'm playing most of these just because they go in aggro, they go in aristocrats, they go in madness. They so many decks want them that you kind of need that. Like we're not at that point where there's critical density where you can really be cutting any yet. You're kind of, we're still at the point where we're adding them. Probably in a year or two, we'll be at the point where we can, okay, let's cut one or two. Like let's cut Bloodsoaked Champion or something like that.
I also will guarantee if you put this in your cube, you will discover many new ways that this triggers that you hadn't thought about. If you cascade into something, this triggers. If you use like one of the red planeswalkers that you exile a card and you can cast it this turn, like a Chandra, that will trigger this. There's
Yeah. Ooh, this with like Laelia the Blade Reforged would be nice.
Oh, that's very
That's
strong.
that's a lot of power. Yeah.
Yeah, no, cool card, I think.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Primaris Eliminator. It is 4 and a black for a 3/2 Astartes warrior. When it enters the battlefield, choose one. Either you can choose either Executioner's Round, which is destroy target creature, or Hyper Frag Round, which is creatures target players controls get -2/-2 until end of turn. So remember what we were saying about Ravenous Chupacabra a minute ago. We already have another one on top of the other one coming for its crown. So the fact that this has a very similar body to the Chupacabra, and it is the 1 extra mana. It's easy to cast, just the 1 pip of black. And this is what I was saying earlier about I don't like sideboard cards. For me, this isn't a sideboard card. This is a modal card. This is a card you're happy to use both abilities. Or the baseline of this is it's a 3/2 for 5 that kills something. That's great. That is perfectly fine. Having the additional flexibility of giving all your opponent's creatures -2/-2, you're probably going to use it like 20, I think less than a third of the time you're going to be using that one. But when you do, it will be backbreaking. Like you're really going to wipe out your opponent if you're using that ability. So I like the flexibility. It is a bit pricey. There is just 5 mana. By that point, you're getting into like generally some good stuff. But I think it's interesting, and I think it's cool, and the flexibility may mean it has a place, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Not much knock it about. It's a good flexible 5 mana value creature. Having said that, there's lots of good 5 mana value creatures. You can only really put a couple of them in your cube. If you want, you can pick this one. If you want, you can pick a different one. You'll be fine. Okay, next up we have Psychomancer. It is 1 and a black for a 1/1 flyer. It has Harbinger of Despair. Whenever Psychomancer or another non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, or is put into exile from the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Yeah, more cards in the graveyard artifacts deck. This goes very nice into any sort of eggs type deck, really. Those I think they're kind of niche, but there are cubes where you have that sort of Croc Clan Iron where you're playing white often for sort of Second Sunrise. People who played Standard a very long time ago, or maybe it was Extended, will be familiar with the misery of playing against eggs decks and the 45-minute turns or whatever. But yeah, this goes pretty nicely into that space. I think the cube versions are probably less obnoxious than that, and yeah, this looks pretty good. You'll also get in the chip damage because it's a 2 mana 1/1 flyer, and it's an artifact itself, so it gives you more fodder, gives you another cheap artifact to power up all your synergies.
Yeah, the fact it's an artifact is quite nice. Probably the easiest thing to compare this to is like Disciple of the Vault, and this feels like the kind of the fixed version of that, because obviously Disciple of the Vault came out in like Mirrodin block, I think, and that's whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. So obviously that's printed in time before like treasures exist. This is very much of a time where treasure and blood and food and the other one that there probably is that I'm forgetting all exist, and this doesn't trigger off that, which is probably fair. That's probably good. Yeah, the fact this is an artifact as well, meaning that you can put this into like your loops, or you can bring it back with some of the other stuff that's going to be bringing back your eggs and stuff.
Yeah, it does trigger off itself, so that certainly works.
All right, so I think moving on to another pingy, drainy style effect, we have Sanguinary Priest. It is 3 and a black for a 2/4 Astartes cleric with lifelink, and it also has Blood Chalice, which is whenever another creature you control dies, this deals 1 damage to any target. Also, importantly, this is an uncommon. So the way I'm looking at this is like another version of like Zulaport Cutthroat, because it is a drain, because although the ability deals damage to the target, the creature having lifelink means that you will get the life back. The fact that this also goes to any target, so can go to creatures. This can ping 1/1s, or it can go to it can go to face, and go to planeswalkers, it can go to creatures. That's cool and kind of very annoying, I think. And the fact that you're gaining the life back as well I think is quite cool. The 4 mana is a bit pricey, I think, for these kind of effects. Like, generally speaking, most of them are like your Blood Artist is quite cheap, your Zilbert Cutthroat is quite cheap. But this being a 2/4 means it can at least block as well. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It blocks well. It dodges a lot of the red removal spells. I think the card it's not having the being a lot more expensive than Blood Artist is an issue. I think the card I'd compare this more to in a lot of ways is Mayhem Devil. That because if you're putting this card in your deck you're not expecting your dice triggers to come off your opponents just pointing Doomblades at your cards. You're doing that proactively, so you're probably sacrificing them. And Mayhem Devil against creature decks can be absolutely devastating. Whereas a Blood Artist, you need to trigger it a lot of times before you feel like you've got your money's worth. Whereas this sort of effect, you can start mowing down, especially low toughness creatures, really, really quickly, and then having the lifelink on top of that. This can stabilize your board against an aggressive deck very, very well, or start getting rid of their mana dorks, picking off planeswalkers. I think this does quite a lot.
Nice. Do you think this goes in most cubes that are supporting, or could this go in most cubes that are supporting an aristocrat theme? Do you think, if it's already running Mayhem Devil, do you think that this is an easy swap, or do you think it kind of complements it, or is it kind of the Mayhem level kind of power level?
I would say this is worse than Mayhem Devil on average, just because it's an extra mana. But I think if you want a second one of that effect, or a mono black Mayhem Devil, this maybe makes it. And if you're in Peasant Cube, this is also interesting. Okay. Next up we have this is a hard word. Let's go with Scorpek Lord. This is 2 and a black for a 3/2 with Menace. It has command protocols. Other artifact creatures you control have +1/+0 and Menace. And it has Unearth for 2 and a black. Nice aggressive creature. This is, I think, pushing in kind of a different direction from, even though it has Unearth, this feels quite different to a lot of the other artifact graveyard stuff we've seen from this Necron deck. A lot of those cards seem to be trying to go quite big, play a lot of super high impact stuff, make some mana, recur it. This for me is more like a go wide artifact, small creature beatdown card. I think maybe you're in a deck where you have the actual affinity creatures, your Frogmites, your Signal Pests. Also kind of interesting if you have like Hangerback Walker in your cube. That makes a lot of 1/1 tokens. Yeah, you're making a lot of servo tokens, a lot of Thopters. This can really power them up. This does quite a lot. And then obviously later on you have that Unearth for a little extra damage out of the graveyard.
Nice. No, I'd agree. Yeah, so I've been looking at trying to make an artifact aggro deck work for a while. Before this set, it was primarily like Boris, because you had, it's like Toolcraft Exemplar. You had things that basically, like Court Homunculus, that they're basically like 1/1s that become like 2/2s if you have artifacts, that kind of thing. Because you also have the modular stuff in those colors as well from Modern Horizons 2. But like this, like there isn't a great amount of aggressive black artifacts. There's more now because of this set. But like beforehand, you had like I do like Blade of the Oni. I think that's quite a nice creature. That already has Menace, unfortunately. But like that with like Vault Scourge and either some equipment or some of the aggressive creatures. What's the white one with Phyrexian mana that is normally in?
The 3/1 first strike.
Yeah, Porcelain Legionnaire. So you might have to get a little bit splashy by kind of it is a mono black deck, but you are playing other colors in terms of like Phyrexian mana. That could be interesting.
Yeah, vehicles work as well in that deck.
Oh, that's true.
Smuggler's Copter and the like.
No, that's true. No, so like this is definitely like I said it a bit in my Dominaria United series that basically like some cards I look at and be like that isn't there yet. keep it in the back of your head. Once you start seeing more of them, because there are always more magic cards. Once you start seeing more of them, kind of like you have that bank, and then like if there's like 2 or 3 more good aggressive, because like 3 mana for a 3/2 with menace is a fine body in an aggro deck, I think. If we get like 3 or 4 more like these, or we get like a couple of cheaper costed like 1 or 2 drop black creatures, or some more aggressive artifact creatures, then this could be a potential future archetype to look at in Cube, I think.
Sure. I think there's also potential in there's some cards that support sacrificing artifacts in a more aggressive context, doing face damage in sort of a red-black deck. Maybe you have the Thopter Engineer, you're making Thopters, you're making servos, you're playing only Cult Anvils and the like.
Ooh, I like that.
Getting in chip damage. And this turns all of your tokens into real-ish threats. You know, it's this represents a lot of damage if you have 4 artifact creatures in play, even if they all suck individually.
Yeah. Right, I'm up next with Trezine the Infinite. It is 4 black for a legendary artifact creature Necron. It is a 4/6 with Death Touch, and it has Prismatic Gallery. As long as Trezine the Infinite is on the battlefield, it has activated abilities of all artifact cards in your graveyard. So this is kind of the Necrotic Ooze ability to get all the abilities from stuff from your graveyard and put it all into one creature. Obviously, with artifacts, things can get broken very quickly. I'm assuming, James, there must be a way of making infinite mana with this exceptionally quickly.
Oh, absolutely. If you untap with this, there's a lot of ways to just win the game. There's 1-card ones even. If you untap with this and you have Time Vault in your graveyard, you do just win. It will tap to take an extra turn. It does not gain the Time Vault. This doesn't untap ability. You just tap and take an extra turn. But even if you're not running Time Vault in your cube, there's a lot of ways to win with this. For example, Staff of Domination, with anything that makes more than 2 mana, like a Grim Monolith or a Gilded Lotus, that will straight up win you. That will just win you the game. You can make infinite mana untapping it. And
so just to kind of explain that, because with these cards, it has all the cool activated abilities, but it doesn't have any of the drawbacks. So what you were saying about Time Vault, it doesn't have doesn't untap ability. Like same with Grim Monolith, it doesn't have you need to pay 4 to untap it or anything like that. It just it has all the good ones, and you can pick the ones that you want to use how you want to use them.
Yes, exactly. Having said that, most of these combos do involve you untapping with this card. It doesn't inherently have haste. Maybe you can look to play cards that give it haste. Like Anger, for example, that could be interesting.
Yeah. Anger is in my cube right now.
Yeah. The setup cost is real here, let's be honest, but and this is, I think, basically just a combo card. No, you should not be trying to play this on the fair. But if you're running sort of Buried Alive or Entomb in your deck, you could definitely set this up. And yeah, it has a lot of cool ways to win the game. I think if you put it in your cube with some artifact combo things, people will work out how to use it. There may be ways of I'm sure there are ways of winning without having to tap it, so you could use it while it still has Summoning Sickness. I think there's a combo with Triskelion that would work in that space. This is a combo card. You need artifact combos in your cube for this to work. But I think this is a pretty interesting addition if you do have that. You can either be putting them into your graveyard proactively, which you're probably interested in doing anyway if you're running Goblin Welder and Goblin Engineer. Goblin Engineer just does it for you. Or you can be, or this can be if your opponent's countered your combo pieces or removed them or thought-seized them away.
No, that's true. Yeah, a bit of redundancy is nice in those kind of strategies.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So next up we have Treyarch Praetorian. This is 1 black for a 2/1 flyer artifact creature Necron. has dynastic codes. When Treyarch Praetorian enters the battlefield from a graveyard, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. And that is useful with the final ability, which is Unearth, 4 and a black. So I like this mostly because it's a 2/1 artifact creature with flying for 2 mana. That's a really good aggressive body. It will get a lot of chip damage in. It will pressure planeswalkers. And then later on in the game, it's a Muldrifter-ish. Also, the draw cards ability doesn't only work with the Unearth. If you have those Goblin Welders we've been talking about to pair with this entire Necron deck, or you're doing some...
Yeah, the 2 Goblin Welders have got infinitely better
Yeah,
from this set.
yeah.
I think that's the main takeaway. Buy them now, kids. Buy them now.
Or if you're just doing recurring nightmare stuff, right? This is, because this is like a fine creature to play early. It's not like you have to really be building around it that much. And then, yeah, it's a nice little value loop with some recurring nightmare stuff later on. You're probably not looking to just straight up reanimate this, even though you get 2 cards. There's more exciting things you could reanimate, but
I think that's like upside basically. Like I think you're primarily playing this because you want a 2 mana 2/1 flyer in black. Like this is, I said this in my last video, but like a more interesting version of like Carnophage, that kind of stuff. It's like it's a black aggressive creature for 2022. Like the fact that this can come down early and get in. If it's later in the game, you can just play it as a chump blocker. It gets outclassed, and then if you haven't got anything else to do, pay the 5 mana, get it back. It'll probably get in for that 2 damage because it has flying anyway, and then you draw your 2 cards, you lose 2 life, and then you get yourself a bit more gas to kind of push you actually into the late game. I think it's good.
yeah,
it's
really solid. Artifact as well, so it goes in both decks.
Moving on to our last black card. There was a wedge of them, let's be honest. All right, we have Treyarch Stalker. It is 3 black for a 4/5 artifact creature Necron. It has targeting relay. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, choose an opponent. So this is obviously a multiplayer card that in 1-on-1, you are just going to be picking your one opponent. And the reason why you choose that is because creatures attacking the last chosen player have menace. So basically what this actually reads is this is a 5 mana 4/5 with menace that gives all of your creatures menace. I think that's quite solid, if I'm honest with you. If you have any kind of board state, blocking has just got so miserable for your opponents. Yeah, I think this is a pretty solid beta. This and a few other creatures will win you the game. If I'm honest, the biggest issue I could see is that quite a lot of black creatures already have menace nowadays. Blade of the Only has menace. Like you're just seeing like even like Sedgemoor Witch has menace. Like you're just seeing it more and more. Like it's the black version of evasion they're putting on my creatures. So maybe that part isn't. Maybe this is less good than I'm kind of thinking, but to me it just seems like this. It just gives all your team evasion. Like if you're ahead, you're winning. If you're behind, it's a decent body. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's super solid. It's just for me, like, where does it go? Because at 5, it's getting kind of expensive for your aggro deck, and it's not a creature really that my mid-range deck is interested in. If I'm on the more mid-rangey control-y side, I probably want like one of those value 5-drops more than I want this card. Because yes, the body is perfectly solid on blocks, but it's but if you're behind, it is kind of just a vanilla 4/5.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, 5 is a bit of a difficult place for black creatures. Actually, for any kind of mid-rangey creature in Cube, just because 4-drops have got so good.
Yeah.
That like this is like Grave Titan. That's a card you want to cheat out early. This isn't like you haven't done anything if you've cheated this out. If I'm honest, in my cube, I only have 1 black 5-drop right now. Creature, and that is Shriekmaw. So not really a black 5-drop. The other black 5-drop in my cube is Living Death because it's me. But you kind of see that in a lot of other colors as well. Like in green, we only have Acidic Slime and Thragtusk at the moment because in these colors where you can cheat things into play, you kind of want to go bigger. So you want more good 3 and 4 drops and more good 6 and 7 and 8 drops, and so 5 kind of falls in this weird place of kind of like it's a bit too dirtly. Like if they print some that are awesome, then obviously 5s can have a bit of a resurgence. But just right now, I think it's in a bit of a weird place.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And frankly, I think there are 4 drops I'd be more scared of than this card. I mean, if you saw in a vacuum Shieldred and this card, and you had to guess which one cost 4 and which one cost 5, I think you might get it wrong.
Okay, everyone, I think that's where we're going to end it for today. Next time, we're going to be looking at red, green, multicolored, and artifacts. There's still a ton of cool stuff from the set for us to talk about, so make sure you subscribe to get notified when the next video comes out. Do let us know down in the comments if there's any cards that you think we've missed, or what are the cards that we've spoken about you're excited to test in your own cubes. From me and James, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.